Thinking about the use of social media at events is not always easy, particularly when you're the event manager. You've already got a lot to think about. You've got to make sure the event runs smooth, you've got to make sure everybody's happy, you've got to make sure that your senior managers are happy with how the event worked. So adding social media into the mix is not always the simplest of things to think about when you've already got a lot on your plate. In this webinar series, I'm going to talk through how you can actually think about using social media in events and why you might be thinking about using them. Most of our work specialises in the education sector, so that's the particular slant that we'll be giving it in this presentation. So first of all, let's think about why you actually might be thinking about using social media at events. One of the most obvious reasons is to think about drawing people into your event, so actually attracting them in the first place, using social media to market and promote your event via whatever networks you have available to you and via whatever networks are most appropriate to the people that you're trying to reach. Secondly, you might be able to extend the reach of the event. So you may have an event that's in a particular location that people can't actually get to. So can you use social media as a way of reaching out to people who are remote or who, through one reason or another, might not actually be able to attend your event in person? You might also want to use social media to enhance the experience of the event for those who actually either are at the event or for those who are watching it remotely. This can be the back channel where people are talking about your event, sharing ideas, discussing things that are happening and adding additional value to it, or creating content through that event that can then provide something additional after the event itself. And finally, you might also want to use social media for feedback and research at your events. This is a really, really good way of finding out what people actually were really thinking as they were experiencing your event. So we almost always at events these days fill out evaluation forms or ask people to complete a survey. But that survey is always, or that evaluation form is always retrospective. Through social media, we can actually understand exactly what they're thinking and feeling while they're at the event. So we get a very kind of real and authentic sense for what people are actually experiencing. And we might also find out things that we may not be asking a question about on our evaluation forms as well. So these are some of the things that we might actually be thinking about using social media for at events. I'm now going to break this webinar series down. We're going to talk about this in 3 parts. This first part, in this session here, we're going to talk about using social media during an event. After this, we're then going to create a second webinar where we're going to talk about social media after an event. And then finally, there'll be a webinar where we talk about what you need to do before your event in order to plan your use of social media and to really think about how it's actually going to work for you. So these will be broken down into 3 parts so you can watch them at your leisure, and hopefully each part won't take very much of your time. So let's firstly have a look at during the event, how you might be using social media while you're going through your event. At the very basic these days, really, there's an expectation that you should have a hashtag for your event. Hashtags allow people to tag the content that they create when they're talking about an event in a way that is then searchable by other people. What this means we can do is that we can come together online around a particular event, around a particular topic of conversation by searching that hashtag. We don't need to be following the other people that are attending this event. We don't need to be connected with them in any way. We can just have that conversation. And as an event organiser, it also of course means that you can very easily search and find what people are talking about your event, or you can use those hashtags to display the back channel, what we refer to as the stream of conversation on screens around the event, taking into considerations the possibility of there being spam comment, which you do need to be cautious of as well, of course. So when thinking about creating a hashtag for an event, there is nowhere to go to create a hashtag. There's nowhere that you need to register them. You literally just decide what hashtag you want to use and you start using it. But you need to make it available to people so that they actually know what hashtag to use. So your hashtag needs to be short. Bear in mind that mostly hashtags are used on Twitter where people are already limited to 140 characters or less. So we need to make sure that it's short enough that it's not going to take up too much of that space in whatever tweet they're sending. People will also use hashtags on Instagram as well, and likewise you want these to be short because people are just typing really, really quickly, sharing things really quickly, and they need to be something they can input very, very quickly and easily on a mobile device. Your hashtags also need to be meaningful. They need to be something that sounds relevant to the event itself. So make sure that it's kind of recognisable as to what event you're actually using. Either use a word from the title of the event, or think about the acronym for what the event title might actually be called, or something like that, something that actually really means something to the event. You also need something that's fairly easy to guess. It's highly advisable and in fact quite silly if you don't, to make sure that you actually promote your hashtag everywhere and anywhere that you can. So you need to decide this quite early into your event planning, because you probably want to get your hashtag on print publications that you're creating for the event, on any web space that you might have for the event, and in any social media communications that you're putting out about the event as well, to make people realise what it is. But it's also worth making sure that it's easy to guess for those people that haven't seen your signage, signposting the event hashtag, for them to actually be able to have a fairly good guess at what it might be. And you also want to make sure that your hashtag is completely unique to your event. Now, you can work this out by searching the hashtag that you are thinking of using. It could be very, very embarrassing if it turns out that your hashtag isn't unique, and that you're sharing it with somebody else and something else that could be completely unrelated to your event and could even be quite dodgy. So make sure that whatever hashtag you choose is only being used by you for your event. So moving on, the next thing that you really want to be doing during your event is really listening to what people are saying about you online, whether they're using a hashtag or whether they're just talking about the event. So you do this by monitoring, and this is where you need really, really good resource in order to do this, because as an event manager, on the day, you probably won't have time to be listening to the back channel and to be really listening to what people are saying. But by listening to people talking at your event, you can get real insights into what's working for them as guests and attendees, what's not working for them, what speakers do they think are great, what questions might they have for speakers that perhaps they're too shy to raise their hand and ask for themselves, that you might be able to ask on their behalf. What problems might they be facing? Do they all know where the toilets are? Do they know where the exits are? Do they know where to find their next rooms? Is the heating in the room too hot or too cold? Might there be people coming together and saying things like this online that nobody actually then takes the initiative to come up and say to you in person? So what are the kind of things that you can be listening out for at events that can really provide you with very, very useful feedback and insights? You might consider setting up a Twitter username for the event itself. Now, you need to weigh up the pros and cons of doing this. This is only really worth doing if it's a big event, if the event is repeated, every year or every so often, so that it's really worth having a particular Twitter username for it. For one-off events, for smaller events, it's probably not worth it. You're better off just to have a hashtag that you use for a pre-existing Twitter account already. But big events, like things like the South by Southwest conference, or in the Higher Ed Web conference and things like that we've already seen the hashtag for, they're big events. They run every year. They have a lot of conversation around them throughout the year. They have a lot of people wanting to engage with the organisers throughout the year as well. So in these cases, it's worth having a Twitter username set up just for the event. And during the event as well, if you want to be live tweeting from an event, it might also be worth having a specific Twitter username set up for that event, because if you're using a pre-existing one and you're tweeting a lot, you could annoy and alienate existing followers who don't actually have an interest in that particular event. So be cautious and careful about how you use it. If you are live tweeting during an event, don't just post things like Joe Bloggs is now taking the stage to give a talk. Tell us something about what Joe Bloggs is saying. Give us some insights into what's going on at the event, rather than just a commentary of what is actually happening step by step. We want to learn from the event. We want to know some of the little nuggets that you're hearing. So share sound bites, not just actions. The other thing that you might consider with events is the use of geosocial networking, location-based services as well. So here what we might be encouraging our guests and our delegates to do is to check in at your event. So by doing this, they are sharing with their online networks, their social networks, where they are, i.e. in this case, they are on your campus, they are at your school, they are at your event, whatever it might be. The market leading service really for geosocial networking is Foursquare. So this is just a screen grab from my Foursquare activity checking into a particular conference. So here I log on to Foursquare on my iPhone in my case. It uses the GPS in my phone. It recognises where I am. It provides me with a list of locations in the vicinity of where I am. I select which one I'm in. I can add a message on the left-hand side there, what are you up to tell people what I'm doing at that particular venue. And I can choose to share my check-in information on Facebook and Twitter if I wish. I then hit the green button, and by doing that, I'm sharing with the people that I'm connected with online that I am here, I am at this event, I am at this venue. and then I can, can leave tips about that particular event, that particular venue, in that platform for others to see. So here you can see that the particular check-in that I was just sharing on Foursquare just now, I also shared that on Twitter. Now, on Foursquare, Foursquare uses nowhere near as many people use Foursquare as use platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So they're always going to be a much, much smaller community of people actually seeing that check-in on Foursquare. But by sharing it on and posting it to Twitter, my reach has then gone from something like 60 people up to 3,500 people, potential community size there. So this is a good way to kind of get it out there even further, that people are at your event, that they're on your campus, and to share what they're doing. But it's not just Foursquare, it's Facebook Places as well, of course. So you might also want to be encouraging your people just to check in on Facebook. So you need to make sure that your place is correctly set up on Facebook, that it's somehow linked to a relevant page, so that you actually potentially get some good coverage and potentially some good click-throughs as a consequence of people checking into that place as well. And you want to potentially think about encouraging people to actually check in. Now, you need to be quite careful about this. There is an ethical concern of doing this. By encouraging people to check in, you're encouraging them to reveal to the rest of the world that they're connected to online, where they are at a particular moment in time. You shouldn't be doing this with minors, so you should only really do this with people who are older, who are considered to be able to kind of make these sort of decisions for themselves, that maybe don't have the same kind of e-safety concerns that we would have with younger audiences. This is at the University of Kentucky. They posted, they didn't post, they built all around their campus and put up these large wooden Facebook Places check-in signs to encourage people to check in around their college campus as they're going around. And the other thing you might want to think about using location-based services and apps for is gaming as well. People are motivated by games, people enjoy playing games, and if you can turn your event experience into some kind of gaming mentality, whether it's a treasure hunt or a challenge game where people have to do challenges around your campus as they're exploring the campus and doing different things, then that might be also something that you might consider. Some of the platforms that are worth looking at for this for are Urban Bingo or Scavenger. Even Foursquare can be used in a gaming type mentality as well. So think about how you might be able to inject some more fun into encouraging people to check into your location and therefore reveal to their friends and their wider network of wider networks online that they are in your location. This is me at a particular event that I was at before Christmas. This is me shoving my head through one of those signs and someone taking a picture of me. And this to me represents what we're about to talk about here. And this is the creating shareable content experiences at events. By shareable content experiences, what I mean are things that people will see and potentially interact with and do or experience as they're at a live event on your campus, on your school, that they might want to take a photo of and publish to their social networks online. So to do this, we kind of need to think about some of the cool things that people might see, some things that are quirky, something that's different, something they can do. In this case, sticking your head through a picture and taking a silly picture of yourself. But a few more examples here of other ones that I've seen recently. Sorry, just go back to that. The one in the top there is the South by Southwest conference earlier this year. This is the throne that was put up to promote Game of Thrones, so people could go and sit in the throne and have pictures of themselves taken in the thrones. And of course, a great way of promoting Game of Thrones online to people's social networks. And the queues for people wanting their pictures taken sat in this throne were really quite staggering. The one to the right there is some giant asparagus that I saw at a college where I was doing some work recently. We're taken into the art department. We walked in, suddenly some giant asparagus is being built in front of us. And, what are you going to do? The first thing you want to do when you see something like that's really quite unusual, is to take a picture of it and put it online and share with your friends this crazy thing that you've just seen. The bottom example is a really simple one. It was at a UCAS conference, and it was a conference on social media. So during the lunch break, they provided to all the guests cupcakes that had social media icons on them. And loads of people were taking pictures of these and sharing them online just because they thought they were quite cool, they were a little bit quirky, and they were also relevant to the conference that people were at. If you want to take it a step further, you might also think about augmented reality. Now, augmented reality is when we use technology to, in some way, layer additional information over a real life experience. So, it's often driven by the use of mobile devices, and particularly at events, live events, it would be a mobile based experience taking place on a smartphone or an iPad or some other kind of tablet device. I'm just going to very quickly play out for you a video. This is Asda supermarket, their augmented reality experience that they created live in their stores this Easter. I'll stop it there. You probably get the idea. So as you hold up your phone or your some kind of smart device, whether it's an iPhone or a tablet, to a particular marker, something pops up on the screen. So you can see that real world in front of you, but we're also layering something else over the top of it. In this case, it's a very cute, silly bunny. But there's no reason why this kind of technology couldn't be used for much more serious purposes at events as well. And at its very simplest level, thinking about using things like QR codes. Now there's a massive overuse of QR codes. As a technology, they've become quite gimmicky and used for rather pointless things, but the use of them on things like delegate badges in order to help delegates share contacts details with each other is quite useful. So this is my badge from the South by Southwest conference earlier in the year. Other delegates could scan my QR code on my badge and could get my contact details instantly on their smartphone, kind of reducing the need to exchange business cards all the time. You might also want to think about how you can work with your speakers at events. And speakers, of course, are a critical source of content for you. So do think and do plan about how you're going to work with them. So these are some of the things that you might want to think about doing with them. You might want to think about pre-recording some kind of promotion for your event with your speakers, so they can help you actually promote your event online. Get them involved in that. Some of your speakers might have large networks of communities out there that can actually be interested in your event. If your speaker's there, chances are it's also going to be relevant to the people that they're connected to online. So have a think about how they can do this. So this is a very silly little thing, but this is just me seeing that my name was at in the program for the promotion or program for the CASE Europe Annual Conference coming up in September, and this is me just taking a quick Instagram picture of it and sharing it via Twitter online. And the moment that I've shared that online, people are kind of coming back and saying, this event looks great, and responding to that, and it's kind of raising their interest. Now, the CASE Europe Twitter account has just over 2,000 followers on it, but I have a little bit more than that on my own account. So if the CASE can get as many speakers as possible to kind of be tweeting about what they're doing at that event, it's going to raise people's interest in a much wider community than those that you already have. You might also want to think about actually pre-recording some segments at events as well. I'm not going to play this now, but on the right hand side is a little video that I recorded in the same style that I'm recording this webinar now for a conference I was speaking at in Amsterdam last year. It really is just like a little 3-minute video with just a little teaser about what I was then going to go on to speak about at that conference. So again, pre-recording to promote the conference. While they're at the event itself, don't just rely on recording their actual speech that they might be given, but think about, instead of doing that, just interview them. Do a quick interview, a 5 or 10 minute interview maximum, to get their key points across that you can then use that video content online afterwards, rather than actually thinking about recording the whole speech that might be far too long for people to watch online. Encourage them to reach out to their networks while they're at the event as well. So encourage them to be tweeting and sharing what they're up to. Encourage them to check in at your event as well. Ask them if you can access their slides and if you can share those slides online afterwards, either via something like slideshare.net or your own custom built web presence for your event, whether that be a website or a blog that you might have. But see if you can think about doing that. But with anything that you're doing with any of this, make sure you get the speaker's permission. They may think that they are speaking under Chatham House rules at your event. They might not realise that people are live tweeting everything they say. They might not realise that you're about to put their slides online. So make sure that you do have very, very clear permissions from your speakers before you go ahead and do any of this. And then lastly, you might also be thinking about, do we need an app for our event, particularly the bigger events? Some people want to invest in apps. It's really up to you as to whether you go down this route or not. An app can be quite expensive to develop. A mobile site is less expensive to develop. But either way, they both require good planning, and you need to question whether it's actually going to be worth it for you. So apps are going to be good for you if you don't have any Wi-Fi at your event, or there's particularly poor mobile phone reception in the venue that you're likely to use. So apps can deliver content to people without actually the need for them to be online. Apps are only worth developing if they actually use the native functionality of the smartphone that they're using. That means if they're using the GPS technology, if they're using the camera in some way, it's only worth doing it if they're really using that technology. Otherwise, you may as well just develop a mobile site instead. You of course need to question, does your audience even use smartphones? You might find it's completely pointless developing an app for just an iPhone. You probably need to develop an app for multi-platform, so you probably need to develop for Android, for BlackBerry, and for iPhone as well, and possibly even Symbian if you've got a high number of users who are using Nokia devices too. So think about what devices they use. Do they use them at all? Are they even likely to install an app for this particular event? And if you do decide to develop an app, make sure that it's scalable and it's something that you can replicate, that you can use that technology for other events that you might have coming up. This is an example of an app that I thought was particularly good, South by Southwest conference again. On the left-hand side screen, you can see that we were able to look at the entire programme for the event, so you could scroll through, look at all the different breakout sessions that were going on, select the ones by clicking on the star that you actually wanted to attend. If you then clicked on the My South by Southwest button at the bottom of the app, you could then see basically your own personalised schedule, and there you could then click on and have a look at individual session descriptions. You could see the speakers, you could get information about the speakers, you could see their social profiles as well on there. But it also used the GPS capability within the phone to be able to help people find their way around the event as well. In the case of South by, it's such a huge event. It takes place in multiple venues around downtown Austin, so there's a need to move from place to place, and so the app is a way in which people could be able to navigate their way from venue to venue using the GPS technology built into their phone. So really good use of apps there. Mobile sites are the alternative. Mobile sites typically are a lot easier to produce, but you can only really produce a mobile site and have it effective for you if you know that there's going to be Wi-Fi at the venue that you're holding your event at, or you have good mobile reception there. If you don't have that, then people won't be able to access the content on the mobile site. Mobile sites are great when it doesn't need any kind of native feature that the smartphone have. So when you're not doing anything clever with GPS mapping or with people being able to use cameras or anything like that. So when you're just providing fairly static content, again, it can be good for that. You need to consider whether you're going to develop a responsive site or a mobile site. Two quite separate things. A responsive site would be exactly the same as any other website, would look good in a web browser as well on a desktop device, but when it gets resized, when it recognises that it's a mobile device, it resizes and reorders the content. It makes it much larger on a screen so that people can see that without having to pinch and zoom. Or you can develop a mobile site which is only going to be seen on a mobile device. If you develop a mobile site, you might also need to be developing a separate website as well for desktop use. So if you go down that route, you're then potentially dealing with two separate sites that you've got to think about, whereas the responsive route, you're only dealing with one site, and the content will just change size and shape and layout depending on the size of the browser that the person's using. And make sure that any content that you're producing for your event, if you know that people are going to be using it live either through an app or through a mobile site, make sure that you're writing that content, that you're providing that text, you're producing images that really do have mobile in mind. Small screen, on the go, needs to be short, needs to be accurate, needs to be large and easy to view in the case of an image as well. So bear that in mind if you're thinking about having an app or a mobile site. So we're going to pause there, and we're going to stop the recording, and then we're going to move on to thinking about how to use social media after your event in the next part of this webinar series. Thank you.